Well, it's happening. The final stages of Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. The prosecution and the defense last hour rested their cases. And the first son will not take the witness stand. Right now, the court is about to reconvene after a lunch break. We just saw all the family members file back in. You know, among them, the president's brother, James, and also Hunter Biden's grown daughter, Naomi, and the stepmom, Jill Biden. Closing arguments are set to begin in just a few minutes. We'll let you know as those things kind of unfold rapidly right now, because the jury could get that case by the end of today or early tomorrow morning. We're all over it. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-hosts Emily Compagno and Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us today, Fox Business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Cheryl Casoni is with us. And Fox and Friends co-host Lawrence Jones is here. First, though, let's go to Rich Edson. Let's catch up what's been going on inside that courtroom in Wilmington, Delaware. Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Harris. Well, just about 3 or 4 minutes from now, it's the scheduled closing arguments for the prosecution and the defense are scheduled to begin here at the Wilmington courthouse. That means the jury very well could get this case later today or early tomorrow when deliberations could begin. Typically, when you've got the closing arguments, the prosecution will go first, followed by the defense, and then the prosecution can go again if it chooses to do so. This morning got off to a pretty slow start. Attorneys spent much of it conferring privately with the judge. The defense rested, then the prosecution called a rebuttal witness, the FBI special agent Erica Jensen. She was assigned the case last year to connect Hunter's drug use to the time of that gun purchase. After a short session of questioning, the prosecution rested, and here we are. Roughly 24 family members and allies are here of Hunter Biden, including First Lady Jill Biden, his sister Ashley, Jim Biden, his uncle, and Hunter's wife, Melissa. Hunter flashed him a big smile and allies at one point, but has overall remained pretty serious. Once the jury gets the case, they'll consider whether the prosecution proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Hunter was a drug user when he bought and possessed a firearm and swore on a federal form that he was not a drug user. The defense maintains that no witness actually saw him use drugs during that period in October of 2018. If he's found guilty, he faces a maximum of 25 years and $750,000 in fines, though he would be a first-time offender and a nonviolent one at that. This isn't his only court date, September 5th in Los Angeles. That's when the tax-related charges trial begin, but we expect this trial to be coming to a conclusion soon. Back to you. That's
a good thing for Hunter Biden, depending on how it goes, because he's got to get ready for that next, what I've been told, will be a much tougher trial for him in the court. So, Rich, thank you very much. Let us know if they start to get jury instructions and all of that. We'll bring you back. Appreciate your time. You know, Lawrence, this has gone by expeditiously faster than Trump's trial.
It has. It would have been a lot faster if the federal judge didn't look over to the prosecution and say, hey, is there any precedent for this? And then looked over to the defense and said, hey, is there any precedent? And both parties said there's no precedent. So the federal judge said, I'm throwing this out. You guys got to come back and we're going to go to trial with this. You know, a lot of people have said the addiction problem is a real issue in the country, so do not judge Hunter Biden because of that. Not everyone that has an addiction goes out and lies on a forum to get a gun.
100%.
And the reason why this matters is, Harris, you remember the crack epidemic back in the 80s? And
yes,
the reason why I
no.
mention it, because it wasn't treated as if it was an addiction at the time.
Right.
They were aggressive, and the chief architect of making sure people got behind bars during the crack epidemic was Joe Biden, who was the author of the crime bill. And so when you hear liberal pundits that will go on TV and say, he's being treated differently because he is a Biden, I would say, go talk to all the black men. Some of them are my uncles who struggled with crack back in those days. And they didn't get a sweetheart deal offer. They were locked up. They were not getting any type of treatment or anything like that. And so I think as we look at this and the political ramifications of, yes, this is Hunter Biden and his case, but also Joe Biden wants compassion for his son, but he didn't show compassion for other people's sons that went through the criminal justice system.
Well, and I'm going to ask for Emily's help on this. Neither did his vice presidential pick. Like in California, she didn't have any, any problems with throwing people in jail or having these cases go against them as a former attorney general.
That's right. And I argue that that's even more draconian because that's an incarceratory consequence for drug use. Here, the consequence would be for behavior while on drug use that is labeled illegal. And I appreciate your point so much, and I want to take it in a different direction to make the point that other people as well do not have the luxury of having addiction soften the severity of their crimes.
That's right.
Think about how many people made a horrible decision to drive drunk, and it ended up in a fatality. And then they get charged, rightly so, under our criminal justice system with manslaughter. And you say, gosh, that was a terrible decision, and they didn't mean it. Of course they didn't mean it, but it resulted in a really bad consequence. Right. And then they go to prison. Just last year alone, in just North Carolina, there were 300 people prosecuted for illegal possession of a firearm. So part of these charges includes the fact that he was a drug user an addicted drug user all on drugs while in possession of the gun, which again is illegal here. So the whole point is you can't say, I'm so sorry, I know you didn't mean it. I know you were in the throes of addiction. That's why these laws are in place. And when we see so many people being prosecuted for the same crime over and over again, they just don't have the first lady in the front row. So I hope we see the same consequences we do for every other American that has sat in that same chair.
You know what Paul Morrow told us last hour, and of course he used to work for the DA's office, the very same one that just adjudicated a case against Donald Trump. He said that Jill Biden was taking notes, and the jurors got to see her do that. Now, look, we can't say what she was writing down, but just seeing something that they can't do with the jury instructions in the state of New York. Right. I mean, it is interesting how differently these cases are being handled, both Trump and a Biden. Cheryl, talk to me about the witnesses. So one of them, and I don't know if she's an ex-stripper, but she was a stripper at the time that she knew Hunter Biden. She testified that he was doing crack every 20 minutes.
Yeah, I thought it was every 15 minutes. But either way, the addiction issue has been a big part of the prosecution's case. But at the end of the day, I think you're correct in that the law is going to say, well, whether or not you're an addict does not excuse you from abiding by this country's laws. I think that the big question this morning was whether or not Hunter was going to testify in his own defense. I think it's because so much of the witness testimony was so damning about his behavior around the time of the gun purchase and the text messages that were all happening while he made that gun purchase, that he tried to hide the gun purchase. So, and I also know that in the jury questionnaires, they talked about that they had friends, relatives, they were touched somehow by addiction. That's all going to play into this. But at the end of the day, I'm starting to think the prosecution, and I only play a lawyer on TV, but I do think that the prosecution has a fairly strong case against him. The intimidation factor of having Joe Biden in the courtroom is a factor that only the jury can really answer of how they feel about that.
So you don't think she's just taking notes? I mean, you called her an intimidation factor.
I think it's an intimidation factor. I understand that you want to be there for your son. I'm not discounting that. Her son is facing 25 years maximum in prison. Right. That is horrible. But I'm saying that to have the First Lady of the United States in front of these 12 average people has got to be intimidating.
So, Kayleigh, we talked about something that I kind of revisited today in my mind, and that is, why not an anonymous jury at this point? I mean, look, we don't need to know their names and all that, but we know quite a bit about them.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's one I believe Paul Morrow brought up, and I think it makes a lot of sense, especially when you have these two big political names and not just Hunter Biden. Maybe that would have been the right answer for Donald Trump. But I think what Lauren said is so important. This is not about addiction. No. It simply is not. And Molly Jong-Fast, she's a liberal out on MSNBC, she said the disease that Hunter Biden has is the same disease that I have. It's the same disease, almost 20% of the country has. Well, this isn't about addiction. The left is trying to make it about that. I hope Hunter is better for the sake of him, for the sake of his children, for the sake of his family. This is about accountability. This is about whether he will face the fate that Donald Trump did, where it was unprecedented in the case of Trump, where in the case of Hunter Biden, the Wall Street Journal editorial board says the facts of the case are strong. So the facts match the law, but he's a favorite son of Delaware, as again noted by the Wall Street Journal. So will accountability happen here? That is the A word that matters.
Well, in many cases, I blame Joe Biden. Look, every parent has to deal with things on their own, but I can only judge the president for what he's dealt with Hunter Biden, even with raising his granddaughter. Not only did Hunter not refuse to acknowledge the granddaughter, but the president of the United States fulfilled to. She doesn't even have Secret Service protection. She doesn't even have a stocking in the White House during Christmas time. So there's been a lack of accountability his entire life. Hopefully, our fair justice system will finally hold him accountable.
Yeah, I was reading recently, just to catch up on that case, while Biden and his wife have acknowledged her, they haven't spent time. That's the latest report that I saw with the little granddaughter. But what you're pointing to is just kind of from 37,000 feet, you know, what the parenting is like inside that. But he's 54 years old.
Right.
He's not a kid.
He's a grown man.
And if you look at the form that he lied on, it says drug use or addiction.
Right.
And the witnesses testified that days around the gun purchase were so explosive that Hallie Biden, his now deceased brother's widow, that I can't even say it. Hunter Biden was dating her after he passed away.
With
so
the permission and approval of the president.
She went around and found the gun. She was looking for paraphernalia and came across a gun. So clearly he'd been using drugs at the time around this purchase. I would say that the defense has got to prove he wasn't using drugs, and that's going to be hard to do because he used them in some cases every 20 minutes.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.